guys, it's Shadow the Rat, and for today's video, I want to talk about how you can syringe feed medicine to a difficult rat. And conveniently, my rat Donut is giving me some issues with medication, so she is going to be our star pupil for this video. So first of all, I do want to go over the two most common ways to give medication that are typically the most stress-free. I would recommend trying these first before resorting to force feeding, which is basically what we're going to be talking about at the end of this video, which is kind of a last resort for a lot of rats, but sometimes has to be done. But the first two methods that I always recommend people try is, first of all, just try offering your rat the medication in a syringe, especially if your rat has done prior syringe training, which, by the way, I'm going to have a video linked down below on how to do that. It's a great way to get your rat to have positive associations with the syringe and thus be more willing to take medication from it. But anyways, if your rat has done syringe training, or if they're just really into the taste of the medication, sometimes you can just give them medication straight up from the syringe. I mean, some rats are literally just cool with it, and they will treat it like a treat. And that's actually often what happens when I give my rats children's Motrin, which is a anti-inflammatory and over-the-counter one. I will give it to them for something like minor sprains, and usually rats really love the wild berry flavor, so I'm just able to syringe it directly into their mouth without any sort of cover-ups. So if you have a medication like that, you might be able to just syringe it into their mouth and have no problems. Now, if your rat refuses the medication this way, your second option is to mix it in food. Now, this is the option you'll see people usually tell you about because most of the time it is pretty effective, and it's also the best way to prevent aspiration, and it's also a good way to make sure that both you and your rat have a stress-free time with medication. Basically, the way this works is you get a solid food or a liquid food. Personally, I prefer liquid foods, but some people have luck with solid foods as well. And basically, you put the medication in it and mix it up a little bit, and then give it to your rat to eat. So you want to use a treat that they like a lot. For my rats, I often use meat baby food or whipped cream. Both of these work really well for rats because they have strong tastes and the rats really enjoy them. One thing you do need to be careful about when you give medication through food like this is that you need to make sure that your medication is okay to be given with the food you're giving it in. And what I mean by this is that certain medications can be rendered less effective with certain foods. A cool example here is that a lot of antibiotics cannot be given with dairy because dairy products will reduce their effectiveness. So that's just something you want to keep in mind when you're giving medication this way. But there are a lot of good treats out there to give medication in, so it is worth trying a few and just seeing if your rat will take medication in them. Of course, you do want to make sure that your rat actually likes the treat first before you put any medication in there, because the medication will change the taste some, and you need your rat to actually like the food a lot, because otherwise they will notice and not take it. Now, if medicating through food isn't working and you're just wasting medication, at this point you want to move on to the third option, which is force feeding. So force feeding sounds pretty scary, but honestly it's not too bad. There's kind of two main ways to do it. The first one is what I call freehand, and the second one is what I call rat burrito style. So I know these sound a little bit silly, but basically what you want to do for freehand is you take your rat in one hand and make sure that your hand is holding down their arms. This is important because they will try to use their arms to leverage their way out of your grip and escape. So make sure their arms are being held down and then grasp them firmly and hold them with their butt on your knee. And then you want to go ahead and take your syringe and depress it in their mouth. Now, when you depress it in their mouth, it's super important that you're only depressing 0.1 milliliters at most at once. And if you have a young rat or a dwarf rat, I'd recommend halving that. And the reason you don't want to exceed this amount at once is because you want your rat to actually be able to swallow the medication. If you put too much in there at once, they might drool it out, or even worse, they could aspirate it, which is when they breathe it in. And this can lead to aspiration pneumonia, which is super dangerous and can be deadly. So you really want to avoid that. And the best way to avoid that, other than making sure that you're going very slow and not giving too much at once, is you want to make sure that you're aiming for the cheek itself instead of the back of the throat. So I basically try to aim right past the cheek flaps and then put it into the corner of their cheek. So this way they're kind of prompted to swallow it, but at the same time, they aren't going to inhale it because it's in their cheek, so they have a chance to swallow it. And some people will also stroke their rat's throat to try and stimulate them to swallow. Personally, I haven't had much luck with this, but you can try it. Personally, what tends to work better for me is that I will get a food that the rats really want, something like a cheese puff, and I will wave it next to their nose after depressing the medication into their cheek. So they will usually reach out to get the new food just kind of automatically, and when they do so, they tend to swallow the medication. So this is a good way to kind of prompt them to swallow, and it works pretty well for rats in my experience. Now, another thing, of course, you want to be careful of is if you have a very weak rat, then you need to go extra slow, and you need to make sure they're swallowing between every single little bit of medication, because weak rats are much more likely to aspirate than a normal rat that isn't having any sort of swallowing issues. And if your rat is super weak, they may need to get their medications through a nebulizer, which is basically when the medication gets turned into a fine mist that they breathe in. So if your rat is just doing really poorly and cannot really take in medication orally, then this is a good option. And pretty much any vet clinic should be able to give you this sort of option. Even the general clinic that I used to go to would nebulize medications for rats that were just super ill. So definitely consider this if you have a rat that is doing really poorly. Now the burrito method is exactly the same as the freehand method, except that you wrap your rat up like a little rat burrito. And what I mean by this is you take a cloth, you put it around the back of the rat, you wrap it around their arms so they can't get them out, and then take them firmly in one hand, put them butt down on your knee or lap, and then take the syringe and depress it, just like in the freehand method. And the burrito method can be good for rats who are super squirmy or super grabby at the medication, because it just gives you a little bit more control over the situation. Now, I do want to note real quick that there is a slightly higher risk of aspiration if you put your rat on your back to feed the medication the forceful way. So if you can, I would recommend doing it feet up. Personally, the reason I usually do it with the rat's butt down on my knee and on their back is because I find that rats are more likely to drool out the medication if they're standing up. And as long as you're going slow and you're aiming for their cheek, the risk of aspiration, even when they're sitting kind of on their back, is pretty low in a healthy rat. But with that being said, I do think it's worth trying the standing up version first, just because it is the best way to prevent aspiration, especially when force feeding medication. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. Hopefully these methods were helpful to anyone out there who is having issues giving their rats medication. As you can see, Miss Donut had to get some of her meds force-fed and some of her meds given by food. So yeah, that sometimes happens, and it's not really a big deal. You know, forcing it is usually pretty quick. Giving it through food, if your rat is taking it through food, is also usually pretty quick. There's really no one-fit-all method. If your rat is good at taking it one way, then, you know, that works for you, and that's the way you should do it. So yeah, I hope this video was helpful if you were struggling with giving your rat medication, or if you just want to be prepared for giving your rats medication. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope you found it helpful, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!